the guitar neck is kind of a hard thing to do when you're just starting to learn scales, and even after you learn scales, because learning a scale isn't necessarily going to translate into being able to rip through that scale all around the guitar neck unless you learn all the positions of whatever scale you're learning. So in the context of the minor pentatonic scale, which is something I think we are all very familiar with, that of course is the E minor pentatonic scale. So you know that one, right? But do you know the other positions of the scale? Because that is what is going to help you get around the guitar neck and stop defaulting to this very comfortable but also very limiting position. And don't get me wrong, this position here is tons of fun to play, and it really never gets old. That's why it's so popular. But to really break out of that position, all it takes is to learn the different shapes of, in this case, the pentatonic scale. And every scale has different shapes depending on, you know, if you're in the melodic minor, harmonic minor, major scale. Some of them have names, which I've referred to in other lessons when I talk about modes. But forget all that. We're going to stick to the minor pentatonic scale for this concept, because you can take this and apply it to any scale you want to learn, and you'll instantly get better at playing it across the neck and not being stuck in just one position. So this is kind of like a secret way to learn scales, and I'm not necessarily giving you a shortcut. It's just a different way to look at the information, to intake the information so you don't get overwhelmed. So with the minor pentatonic scale, we have 5 notes. We got the root, flat third, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. Back to the root. So each one of those notes has its own position on the guitar neck depending on where your root is. So since our root is E, the next position up will be the flat third position. And all this means, all this position stuff means, is starting from a new bass note. Not root note, mind you, because our root note is always going to be the same, E. But when we're playing the second position, we'll start from a new bass, which will be the flat third. So here's our root note, E. This is going to be root position, or first position. Now, we'll move our bass to the next note in the scale, and this is going to be our second position. So we're starting on this note, G. I'm going to move it down here so it's a little bit easier to see. And we're going to play the same notes we just played, only starting on a new bass. So we started with, now we've got same notes, just played from a new bass. So I'll stop right there for a second so you can absorb that. We got the first position, or the root position, means start with the root. Now, technically, I could play just starting from this second note, or the flat third, to play the second position. I could play it like that and still kind of remain mostly in this first position, or this root position, but that's not exactly breaking us out of that scale box. So we want to take the same notes, just move them up. So all I was doing there was starting from a new bass note and playing the exact same 5 notes that make up this minor pentatonic scale. If you are interested in figuring out what the names of these notes are and why they work like that, why they're called the flat third or the fifth or whatever, all that information is available in the course that I teach called Guitar Super System, linked in the description. So going back to this first position, or this root position, we want to understand that this is the only time this shape will apply. it's going to be a new shape per position, but the notes, like I mentioned, are always going to be the same. So what I mean by that is we have E, our root, G, our flat third, A, our fourth, B, our fifth, and then finally D, our flat seven. Back to E. So E, G, A, B, D, E. Now, to form the next position, G, A, B, D, E. Back to that new bass note. Not a root note, mind you, a new bass note. It's always the flat third in this context of E minor. So get that. That kind of can be confusing. Like, why do you keep calling this the root, the third, first position, second position? There's a lot of numbers involved here. Again, my course, Guitar Super System, will help you sort all those out if you're new to that type of concept. Let's get to the meat of this lesson. How do you avoid just sticking to that one position when you find a backing track or you're in a band situation and you find the minor pentatonic scale is going to work? How do you get out of that root position? Well, on top of learning those new positions, like I mentioned, here is a way to learn those positions in a quicker fashion than trying to memorize all of the 6 strings at once. And the way I do it, or the way I'll teach you to do it, is to learn only 3 strings at a time. And this will be especially useful for smaller scales like the pentatonic scale with only 5 notes. So check it out. We're in that E minor pentatonic, right? So I'm only learning these 3 strings, so it makes it a lot easier than having to learn etc. So I don't want to necessarily dump all those positions and all those notes on you at once if you've never looked at them before. So this method opens up a cool way to improvise. What you'll want to do is try and continuously play some kind of consistent amount of notes, maybe 1/8 notes, to just train yourself to get out of whatever area of the neck you're in as quickly as you come to it. So I'm only going to play these thick 3 strings in the E minor pentatonic scale, and this is going to force me to get out of my comfort zone. And it doesn't matter if I mess up, but you just want to stay consistent at it, and eventually when you do go to improvise and you don't have this limitation on yourself, this restriction, it will allow you to see the fretboard in a much clearer way. So here's an example of me just playing on these thick 3 strings to open up the fretboard. So you can go as fast or as slow as you want. I would recommend using a metronome or a backing track, something to keep you in time while you do this, but you'll find that if you keep yourself consistent at that pace or whatever pace you choose, when you do go to improvise or try and break out of the scale boxes, you will not only see other areas of the neck much more clearly, you will not feel under pressure to depart from that position to another place. You won't feel as tense. You won't be like, crap, what is my next scale pattern? Because you'll have been training yourself to move about in kind of a pushy manner, and it'll be a lot more fluid when you do play something actually melodic. We all know great improvisers and great guitar solos leave space. So with an exercise like that where there's no space at all, that empty space that you end up leaving in a real musical context will give you that extra time to think about where you're going to go to next. So instead of playing something like this, you can have the freedom to play something like this. A lot more musical, making use of the same scale positions, but in a musical way, and I think in a much quicker way as far as application due to the exercise that I went over. So to sum this whole thing up, when you go to learn scale positions, understand the intervals. Use my course Guitar Super System to really hammer that out if you have questions about it. And once you have the scale positions under your belt, take little chunks of them. In other words, take like 3 strings and just learn the first 3 strings of each scale position. And then you can do the same with these bottom 3 strings, or even 2 strings. It doesn't matter what the string set is. Just break up the scale positions into a manageable amount when you're learning them and trying to integrate them into your playing, and do exercises like forcing yourself to consistently play 1/8 notes on said string sets to really push yourself and force yourself to get out of your comfort zone, so that way when you do go to take an awesome guitar solo, you won't feel that pressure. It's kind of like training with weighted clothing or like heavy 25-pound wristbands. When you take those off, you're like super strong. So that's what that exercise is all about. I hope this was a helpful lesson for you guys. I get a lot of questions about how do I get out of this one scale shape and play all along the neck. So this is definitely a way I would recommend doing that. Make sure you leave a question in the comments if you have any, and I'll try and answer them. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.